Oh my god. Listen to that. My voice literally sounds so much better than in the last video. How does that new inline preamp sound? So I got a chance to look at the movie Companion today, and I actually didn't hate it. It was actually a pretty good movie, even though it had some problems, which we'll get into later. So I just wanted to do a quick review on it. I know the last one was actually really long, and I don't want to do that for every review. I'm thinking of what I'll do is just look at as many movies as I can throughout the month and then choose one that I'll do a full review on. This month it'll probably be Captain America Brave New World. But anyways, let's get back to the movie. The movie stars Jack Quaid, who was good in the Hunger Games and honestly not really much else aside from like season 1 of The Boys. But yeah, not much else. It also stars Sophie Thatcher, who is really good in the show Yellow Jackets, despite how weird and just kind of uncomfortable that show was. The movie's rated R, runs at around 90 minutes, 97 minutes to be exact. It's got a budget of around $10 million as of the making of this video. The general synopsis of this movie is that it's about a weekend getaway and everything turns to chaos when one of the droids glitches out and doesn't execute its programming properly. I want to talk about the trailers real quick before we get too far into the story, because the trailers are always important. You watch these trailers and you literally know nothing about the movie. The trailers are extremely vague. I could not sit in my chair and tell you before watching the movie what it was about because that's how vague the trailers are. And some people were saying that the trailers actually spoil the movie, and they do, but that's only if you've seen the movie, really. If you've seen the movie, everything does make sense, but not if you haven't seen the movie. And the reason why this is frustrating is because the movie's actually really good, like I just previously stated, but they spend most of the trailer inserting these critic reviews that don't really matter. And these other credentials about like what previous works that some of the crew has worked on before. Like, I think it was the same writers of The Notebook and the same director of The Barbarian, which are two completely different movies with two completely different audiences. It's basically just a credential. It serves no purpose. Like, I really do not need to see all that stuff, especially if it's an official trailer. Just tell me a little bit about the story. Tell me enough to where I'll get hooked and I'll want to go see the movie. That's all I need. I don't need the other credentials or the critic reviews or anything. Also, the movie's made for IMAX for whatever reason. I really couldn't tell you why. It seems like pretty much every movie nowadays is made for IMAX. So if you're thinking about going to see this movie in IMAX, or really any movie for that matter in IMAX, just don't spend the extra dollars. It's not worth it unless it's like a movie like Top Gun, where you can tell that the movie was made to be immersive in like a different way. So like I said, the movie's actually really good, but the writers couldn't help but throw some politics into the story, which is, again, disappointing because even though it may not seem like it, the movie could have had no politics in it whatsoever and lose absolutely nothing of value, which can't be said for many other movies. Okay, so now I'm going to jump into the story. This is the one and only spoiler alert. If you want to skip ahead to the end to hear my verdict, skip to this time, whatever I throw up on the screen. We're introduced to our two main characters named Josh and Iris. Iris is actually the main protagonist though. Iris is a droid, but they literally call them fuckbots, which is super weird. I'm not making this up. Like, that is the literal trademark name of the product in this movie is fuckbot, or at least it's highly implied that that's what it is. It's like there are these advanced pieces of technology, and the best name that the manufacturer could come up with was fuckbot. It's super weird and maybe even on the nose a little bit. But like I said, they're basically just advanced sex toys, almost indistinguishable from humans, but Josh uses her mainly for emotional support. He basically only cares about her when he needs attention, which is also pretty on the nose. It's kind of a more left-wing dating stereotype these days, but it's not actually true. It's in Iris's programming that she can't lie, but she's able to use certain loopholes to get around this feature later in the movie. She's also programmed to have an emotional balance between love for Josh and just general rationality, so that the love feels more romantic and organic instead of just a robot that constantly says I love you, which I thought was pretty clever. Josh and Iris decide to go away for the weekend at this Russian billionaire's secluded lake house. There's a few other characters. There's a gay couple, which I'll get into later. Then there's a chick named Kat who's just kind of annoying. The Russian guy's being really creepy toward Iris, and eventually he comes on to her, and in self-defense she ends up killing him, even though these droids are programmed not to be aggressive. It turns out that Iris killing the Russian guy was actually on purpose because Josh and Kat basically jailbroke Iris so that her aggression levels could be elevated. She would then kill the billionaire Russian, and Josh and Kat could steal $12 million in cash from his house and his safe and get away with Iris basically being the scapegoat. Josh ties Iris up until the police and the manufacturer arrive to investigate and have her destroyed most likely. Iris obviously doesn't want to be destroyed, so she manages to sneakily cut herself free with a knife she found and get away. Now she's basically a loose end, and all the other characters need to capture her before their plan gets foiled. The four characters split up into duos. The gay couple, who are named Eli and Patrick, run off to find Iris. We find out that Pat is also a droid and asks Eli that if he were in Iris's shoes, would Eli exploit him like Josh exploited Iris? So then we get kind of a half-assed romantic moment and a gay kissing scene just a couple of seconds too long. Anyways, Iris ends up shooting Eli with his own gun and flees back to the house where she manages to get in a car and drive away. Then Josh reprograms Pat to go after Iris. A cop ends up finding Iris parked on the side of the road and they talk for a second. Pat comes up from behind and beats the living shit out of the cop and takes Iris back to the house. Josh wants to have one last dinner with Iris, then he commands her to shoot herself in the head. She does, and then she's disabled since the CPU is located in her head. Josh calls the manufacturer of the droids, and two of the employees briefly investigate. He feeds them this BS story that they get suspicious of for a second, but eventually they buy it and take Iris to the van, where they plug her into a bay where she can be reset. Josh realizes that Iris's hard drive isn't stored in her head and that it could be used as evidence against him, so he sends Pat after the workers so that he can get Iris back and then destroy the hard drive. Pat kills one of the workers and the other manages to almost get away. Pat ends up catching up to him and then starts strangling him. Iris wakes up from being reset in the van and confronts Pat with an electric baton she found in the van, but because of her aggression levels being reset, she can't actually attack him, and so he takes the baton from her and starts menacingly walking towards her. So instead, she just tries to get him to remember Eli and how much they loved each other, and eventually he backs off. But instead of turning against Josh, he just kills himself because he can't live without the person he was programmed to love, I guess. The worker that Iris saved reprograms her once more so that she's fully autonomous, basically just like a regular human, so that she can go after Josh and finish him off. They have a little bit of a fight, and she finally kills Josh, takes all the millions of dollars, and then just leaves. And then that's the end of the movie Companion. Now, I just want to say, I really don't like female empowerment movies or subtle inserts thereof because it just comes off as super cringy most of the time. Do I really need to remind you guys of Infinity War and Endgame? You guys know what scenes I'm talking about. And I know that's going to offend some people, but I do just want to say that this movie is one of the very few movies that actually does do female empowerment, at least a bit better than usual. It wasn't nearly as blatant and cringy as like Madam Web or Night Bitch last year. On the other hand, there's still this subtle underlying message that women aren't objects and we need to fight misogyny/abuse, even though that message is portrayed in a radically escalated way in this movie and it doesn't really compare to actual reality. It also sends this inaccurate message that most men are like Josh. You know, maybe he's physically capable of inflicting harm, against you or people around him, but deep down, he's just a toxic beta male with no money and doesn't know how to treat women. Then, of course, like I mentioned before, you have the gay couple. This element of the story really just adds nothing except for a bit of added polarity to the political magnet of Hollywood, which I am just so ready to be done with. Going into a new year, I am ready to be done with politics of any kind being in movies. I think Eli should have been a girl. It honestly wouldn't have affected the story in any way. It's obvious that the writers were just checking boxes with these characters, this couple. And I mean, there's a lot more I want to say on it, but it would just take up way too much time, so I'll just leave it at that. I also think that the ending significantly minimized the discussion around the morality of selling these sorts of droids as products, because as we see in the movie, they aren't healthy for the human mind. They basically just thrive on human loneliness, but they also can be exploited to do evil things. And honestly, with these droids, you're kind of just playing God. I personally, in real life, would not be okay with people selling these sorts of droids. I think it's just a moral bad to be doing that sort of thing. And unfortunately, though the film may touch on this topic a little bit, it's never truly addressed at any point in the movie, especially at the end. But overall, I really didn't hate the movie. I thought the premise of it was excellent, very unique. I thought the story and most of its details were excellent on a general level as well. There was a lot of clever moments, like for example, Iris using Josh's phone to change the pitch of her voice to match his so that she could voice activate the Tesla and drive away. Or like when the cop was asking her questions, because she can't lie, she ends up having to change her language settings to German so that she's telling the truth, but the cop just can't understand her. Or when she uses the fact that she can't lie to convince people of the truth. All very clever parts that the writers did a good job on. But then there's a lot of inconsistencies as well that make no sense, like how Josh was able to afford Iris if he's so broke as he says, or how Josh and Kat are supposed to get away with all the money without no one noticing, or how the cop waits way too long to shoot at Pat when it's already too late and he comes up to him and just brutalizes him. There's many more examples in both categories that I haven't listed. As far as the characters go, I really liked Iris, Josh, and Pat, as their characters were the most compelling and interesting, though I would have maybe preferred if Josh was a little more quiet and maybe a little more standoffish. The dialogue was fine too. The only bad dialogue was when Josh was trying to explain to Iris that she is a droid. It just comes off somewhat cringy and a little bit bland, but nothing else really noteworthy. But like I said, despite all that, I really didn't hate it. I think just the issue with everything is that it's plenty good for the audience. It was plenty good for me on a general level, but it just wasn't good enough for the writers / producers. They just had to slip in those political messages when the movie was already really outstanding. So of course, that brings me to my final verdict, and in this case, I will rule in favor of the film companion at 68%. Now, I want to say I was actually thinking about rating this at 82%. Like, again, I liked the story, I liked its characters, but couple in all the politics, couple in all the whys I kept having to ask myself, and the other consistencies, I just had to take a significant score out of the equation there. Although some of the sound design for the movie is really nice to hear in the theater, I really think it's one of those movies that you should probably just wait until you can rent it at home, or just wait until it's streaming, because it's a really good movie, but there's not really a huge element of immersion, so I would just wait until you're at home and can watch it. And that is all for the film companion. If you guys enjoyed this review and want to see more, be sure to drop a like and hit the subscribe button. I'm probably going to do another movie this week. I'm thinking Hard Eyes or Love Hurts. I just don't know which one to do. I'm going to try and do both though. But anyways, that'll be all for this case. Court's adjourned.